Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast, and welcome to today's webinar on Remote Work 2021, 9 activities to engage your remote workforce in the new year. My name is Charles Summers. It is my pleasure to be serving as your moderator today. We've got a 45-minute presentation before the 15-minute Q&A at the end, so if you have any questions at any time during today's presentation, please use the GoToWebinar questions queue, and we will answer them during the Q&A session. We may answer some of them as we go if it pertains to the question that we're on or the slide that we're on. If you'd like to reach out to me about any Humantelligence webinar questions or future webinar topics, feel free to reach out to me directly at charles.summers@humantelligence.com. We'll talk about these things a little bit more towards the end of the call today, but here's a couple of different things that you can try out from Humantelligence to engage your remote employees. First, you can get a diagnostic look at how your employees and teams' behaviors, motivators, and ideal work styles interact with the remote environment and get tips for improving. You can go to remoteworkscorecard.com to get that diagnostic look. We also have a great new plugin available on Google Chrome, Gmail, Google Calendar, Slack, Outlook, Teams, and Facebook Workplace that will help you better communicate and collaborate with colleagues using EQ Insights. You can go to eqeverywhere.com for that one. Or if you're interested in getting a tour of Humantelligence, head on over to humantelligence.com/request-demo. Once I hand things off later on here to Juan, I will go ahead and put these links that I just mentioned in the chat box, along with and I'll also put the slides in there as well. All right, so at this time, I also want to introduce you to today's presenter, Humantelligence CEO Juan Betancourt. Juan is going to serve as our primary presenter today, and I will be also providing color commentary throughout the presentation. So this is actually, Juan, this is I believe our 20th presentation that we've done together. So we've definitely come a long ways here, and I know we have over 900 people expected today, so I'm pretty excited for this one.
Thanks, Charles. Welcome everybody who's joined, and for those who are joining as we go, welcome to you as well.
Perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of lay the groundwork here on how things are going to go and flow today. So first, we're gonna talk about the challenges and some of the symptoms of remote work. So when you moved remote, what kind of issues presented themselves? So we'll talk through some of those things. There's going to be 4 of them specifically that we talk about today. We're going to talk about some kind of short-term spot treatments of those symptoms those 4 symptoms that we're going to talk about. So we'll talk about some short-term fixes of those, some things that you can kind of take away from today's presentation and implement right off the bat. We're also going to talk about what is underlying. So what's actually causing those symptoms beyond, just the pure fact that you're working remote or your employees are remote. So we'll talk about what that underlying cause is, and we'll talk about how to address that and create a more sustainable remote work situation, and provide some tips there. So we'll have 5 tips that are more short-term fixes that you can take away from today, and then we'll have 4 fixes for the underlying cause. And then lastly, we will have a 15-minute Q&A at the end of today's presentation. All right, so our goal today is to provide you with practical advice on how to engage employees who are remote. Again, both in the short and long term. We want to talk about some things that you can immediately take away from today, and you can start doing with your teams or your coworkers right away today. And then we're going to talk about some things that are definitely underlying and some fixes to that. So if you have any questions, again, as we start going through here, definitely put it in the questions queue. We'll answer your questions as we go or during that 15-minute Q&A session at the end. All right, so I want to kick things off here with a kind of a fun exercise for our audience. And so we have 3 polls. We'll spend about 30 seconds on each one of them in terms of getting answers. Juan and I will kind of talk about the answers for a moment as well, and then we'll dive into the rest of our presentation. So let me pull up the poll here. Okay, so you should start seeing the poll on your screen now. Very simple question. Are you personally working remotely right now? So the answers are yes, 100% of the time. Yes, but I occasionally go to the office. Yes, but I routinely go to the office, or no. We'll give it about 15 more seconds here. Give it 5 more seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll and share the results. So you should start seeing the results on your screen right now. So for the question, are you working remotely right now? Yes, 100% of the time had the most with 54%. Yes, but I occasionally go to the office, had second with 28%. Then routinely going to the office, 12%, and 6% said no, you're working in the office still. So Juan, why don't we jump in here and talk about it just a little bit? It looks like the majority of our audience is still working remote.
Yeah, Charles, and this aligns exactly with the latest studies from McKinsey and other consulting firms that are taking a pulse every month with as many data points of 50,000 employees, et cetera. So what everybody's concluded, it's not just the large tech companies like Google, Facebook, Twitter that have announced that their company is going to stay remote through the end of 2021. This is the new normal. There's no more talk about what will come, what will happen. The new normal is half of employees are going to stay remote. The other half are going to be a hybrid, and that is the new normal. So probably one of the reasons why we had 800 people register for this webinar. The reality coming into 2021 is this is the new reality of hybrid or work remote. So it's not just about figuring out what tools to connect remotely, but how to optimize collaboration, communication, and connection in this new culture, if you will. And so this aligns exactly with what the larger studies have found.
Perfect. So I will go ahead and launch the next poll here. So give me just a moment. All right, so are your remote employees motivated and engaged? So think of your remote employees as a collective group. Are they motivated and engaged? So you should start seeing the poll here. Simple answers, yes, no, or somewhat, so somewhere in the middle. Give it about 20 seconds here. Okay, about 5 more seconds. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll and share the results. All right, so most of you, 57% of you said somewhat. So you're not saying they're not engaged, they're not motivated and engaged. They're somewhere in the middle. 37% of you said yes, they are engaged and motivated, and 5% of you said no, they're not motivated, they're not engaged. Juan, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, this also supports most of the data that, the year of 2020, March, April, when it hit, we were all in shock and awe, and all the studies suggest that people lost productivity. They either didn't know how to work, meaning they didn't have the processes or setup, and the companies weren't able to support them at the beginning, or psychologically, psychometrically, which is our area at Humantelligence, they had never used that muscle, meaning in terms of their behaviors, motivators, and work styles, some people are born just to be better at working remote than others who, for example, really like to be part of a team and be belonging and express themselves with others. It might be harder to do that all of a sudden when you find yourself locked up at home. Fast forward 8 months, you now have companies supporting their employees, putting in process procedures to be able to work remote, and a lot of new technologies come out there, as well as people have been able to get used to working remote. And so that's probably what this poll demonstrates, that even for those who aren't born naturally with the abilities and the skills and the motivations to be unique alone and at home, they've figured it out, because humans are adaptable, and just like an athlete who dribbles a basketball with the right hand naturally, if they practice enough, they can dribble with their left hand, and that's what's happening with working remote as a new cultural attribute at most companies.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting too to look. Juan, we actually asked this exact same question back in, I believe, June or July when we had a webinar. So I'll have to go back and pull that data to see how it compares to what we got on this one today. So if I find that, I'll send it out to everybody. All right, I'll move on to the next poll here, the third and final one. All right, so similar question to the last one we just had. Would you say your remote employees are more or less engaged now than they were in the office? So, well, some of you said, yeah, they're engaged. Are they more engaged or are they less engaged than they were before? So, if you're not sure, if you don't have, purview into remote employees engagement levels, just say you're not sure. That's okay too. Give it about 15 seconds here. Okay, 5 seconds. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close up the poll and share the results. All right, so about 40% of you said, I'm not sure. That's okay. Let's take a look at the other two here. So 45% said less engaged, 15% said more engaged. So like you said, Juan, it's kind of, it can be a shock to some people. Some people are more, innately, fit for remote work. We'll talk about that a little bit more, and that's something that the culture or the remote work scorecard diagnostic actually looks at. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. But Juan, if you want to jump in here and add some color to this.
Yeah, and this question, I think when they've done this study, the question at the larger study, we're taking these poll questions from larger companies that have done studies across tens of thousands of people and just doing it for our population of 800 for this call. But the questions also ask, are people more productive, less productive, or you're not sure? And so whether, and engage, a lot of people associate synonymously with productivity. You can see clearly the middle area, less engaged, almost half, 45%, are less engaged or less productive. And even if you take the I'm not sure, cut that in half, you're at about 2/3, 65%, that are likely not as productive, not as engaged. And so even though people have gotten used to working remote, there are still stresses and productivity issues. And so today we're going to go over some ways of getting people more productive, more engaged, more motivated, which all feeds on itself. Very practical tips.
Cool. Juan, so I'm just gonna kick it to you, and you keep running with it here, and then I'll jump back here after another few slides.
Perfect. So the initial insights that we've collected in our research and from our own clients on working remote is the following. More than ever, it seems now that IT leaders hold the keys to a positive company culture in a digital transformation to working remote. So many of you, most of you, are HR leaders or mid-level HR managers. You need to find ways and bridge that often distant gap between you, your Department of Human Resources, the subgroup of engagement or culture in HR with the IT or CIO leaders, to help put people first at your organization. Phase one of moving remote was all about technology platforms, right? And so IT is key in delivering that for communication like video and chat. And phase two has been shifting towards, and that's where we enter today in 2021, everybody's already been set up by IT in connecting the humans, which is an HR problem. But now it's how do we enhance or improve that communication, connection, and collaboration. And so a lot of companies, Humantelligence included, many companies out there have created really cool plugins or enhancing tools to these technology platforms that give employees more productive and equitable experiences. Next. Some symptoms of a typically distributed workforce. at the end of 2020 that we have found and starting in 2021, and this does not apply to all of you, and maybe it's different for small companies versus larger companies. Obviously, if it's a manufacturing company, don't have many people working at all and they're on furlough. So take this with a grain of salt depending on your industry and the size of your company. But some of the most prevalent issues with people and teams working remote are the following. Zoom fatigue, right? How many of us have been on way too many Zooms? Just like in the physical office space, you get to too many meetings. Sometimes Zoom fatigue is setting in, including other chat and video collaboration tools where you're just chasing your tail trying to keep up with all the technology that's put into place. Second, isolation or lack of belonging for those of us who love being part of a team and being at each other's face and having that lunch at 12 o'clock with others and connecting in the hallway or the coffee and water bottle, that's going to be challenging. And so that is also rubbing some employees. Feeling less motivated and having less productivity that they had in the past. These are all symptoms that we find in many of our clients, and all the research shows is key to improving for a more productive and profitable company. Next. What are some of the underlying causes? Well, unexpectedly, although all of you have coffee mugs and t-shirts and on corporate walls of yours, if you're large companies, your culture statements, right? We are one culture, we are X, Y, or Z. Before COVID, all those things made sense. COVID has thrown that out the window because unexpectedly, all of your cultures have changed. What people have learned the hard way through a airborne virus that came from China and possibly a little bat or other sources to be determined later, is that this virus has forced companies to understand that they don't have one culture that's stagnant for 5 or 10 years. That culture is different between sales and marketing. That culture, when you have to work remotely, is a very different culture than when you get to go to an office. So let's first define culture so everyone's on the same page. Culture is not top-down defined. Culture is your people, the psychology they have and how they work, and that is a bottom-up thing. So it is one, the way things get done in your organization, large or small, whether it's marketing or finance at, for example, Coca-Cola, and it's sustained patterns of behaviors over time that are supported by the shared experiences. And 3, it's the values or what motivates people and the beliefs of that organization bottom up. You could bring a CEO who has very different behaviors and values than the rest of the company. It doesn't mean that the company will instantly quickly fall in line behind that CEO. The reason why culture transformation seems to be so hard and companies pay millions of dollars to the McKinseys, the BCGs, the Bains of the world is that it's not as simple as replacing one leader, and it is not a top-down thing. And many of those consulting-oriented projects fail because it's too focused on the top-down. Culture is what transforms individual employees into a collective, cohesive whole. Next.
Cool. So I'm gonna jump back in here, Juan. And we've actually got a lot of questions coming in, and a couple of people having issues with their audio. And definitely take a look at that audio section in your control panel, and if you need to, you can use the phone option. If you're having issues with your audio, you probably can't hear me, but I'll send everybody a note on that privately. Also, so I'm going to jump in here and talk through this slide. Okay, so treating the symptoms. So we're going to talk about tips 1 through 5 right now. So these are things that you can take away from today's presentation. You can implement today, starting today. And you know, these are definitely meant to be, again, short-term band-aids. And once we talk about that underlying issue, we can you know, sustain these a little bit more easily. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into tip number 1, and that's daily stand-ups. And so this is something that I do with my team. I've always done this with my teams in the past. But basically all it is, you know, 3 to 5 minute meeting every morning. Some people do it just on Slack or on Teams as well. Call them Slack ups, or you know, there's different terminology for them. But you know, basically I personally like to start them about 15 minutes after the start of the workday. Gives everybody a chance to organize their day, and come into the meeting with a really solid idea of what they're going to accomplish for the day. Limit it to 8 people. You might be able to get away with 10, but definitely try to stay within that parameter of 3 to 5 minutes total. And give everybody the floor for 30 seconds. The leader of the group should definitely, and have different leaders kind of run the call. So ask a different person on the team to run the call each morning. But really the question that you're trying to get at is what is the one thing that you're trying to accomplish for the day, or what is the one key action that you're trying to accomplish for the day? You can only have one, and then you kind of structure your day around that. And it's based on the book, The One Thing. So you see the picture down there, and I definitely recommend that if you haven't read it. I'm sure a lot of you have, but it's a really good way to just structure your day. Make sure that you're getting your very most important thing complete for the day, but also an opportunity to connect with your colleagues and get an understanding of what they're working on, and kind of give you that sense of belonging and remove that isolation, make you more productive. And then, if there's any side discussions, you always ask the question, do you have any blockers? That should be a part of it. So do you have any blockers to accomplishing that one thing that you need to accomplish today? And if anybody's on the call that can help with that, take it offline. Or, if they can help pave the way to removing that blocker, take that offline and talk to that person about removing that blocker. And so I want to introduce this concept over here on the right-hand side, which is, how does this interact with those symptoms that we talked about? So how does this tip number 1, daily stand-ups, how does it actually, how does it affect those symptoms? And so, isolation, lack of belonging. You're going to be in a meeting with your colleagues, and so that's going to help you and everybody's getting an equal amount of floor time. And so creating an equitable situation for you to share and connect with your colleagues also makes you more productive, because you can kind of piggyback. If somebody's one thing is, in line with yours, you can work together on it. It's not meant to be a motivational thing, and then, has a slight impact negatively on, Zoom or chat fatigue. So we're all kind of aware of what that is at this point, I think. But any meeting that's on your calendar can definitely lead to that kind of fatigue. Juan, did you have anything to add to that before I move on?
Nope, go ahead, Charles.
Cool. Kick it over to you.
Great. Another tip is kind of virtual special events. So not the weekly or monthly boring meetings related to business, but some things that build community across your team or organization, whether large company or small startup. Some types or examples would be holiday get-togethers for maybe the holidays around December, birthday parties for people to do them virtually for each other. Lighting a candle and blowing it out in front of others is a magical moment, and doing a wish that vibrates through the ether visually is more powerful than just sending an email, obviously. Coffee breaks every once in a while, lunch breaks, eating together, brown bag lunch about what you've learned or sharing best case approaches. You can still do those, except now that you can do them virtually. Office games and even happy hours. We at Humantelligence have done one or all of these at different points, and definitely the feedback from our team is that it really helps motivate. As you can see, the second bullet point, it decreases isolation, doesn't really impact productivity, and definitely doesn't help with Zoom chat fatigue, but the first two are so powerful that seems worthwhile. Next.
Cool. So yeah, I'll jump in and go over tip 3 here, which is shout out channels. So I think shout out channels are a great way to keep people connected to kind of your goals or your mission that you're on as an organization. And so, I put a couple of different types in here. I put, recognition via email or Slack channels. That could be a Teams channel too, or whatever chat you use. But, if you have Salesforce or you have a CRM, you definitely have a mechanism within that tool to create a trigger on certain things that are happening. So if an opportunity is being won, So I put an example in the image here. But if an opportunity is being won, it can trigger and send everybody in the company this message. So we like to say, ring the bell, everybody's excited, and show exactly what that deal was about. And everybody likes to make a big deal out of it, and it's a good way to give recognition. And it has a great impact on those symptoms. And so this is something that can be sustained, I think, over time. And like I mentioned, Salesforce or your CRM probably has a trigger. If you have Salesforce and you need some help with it, just ping me. I can reach out to me, charles.summers@humantelligence.com. I can help you with that, or help your Salesforce admin get that set up. But it interacts with the symptoms in that it helps the lack of belonging, it helps motivation, it keeps you motivated when you're seeing that your company is doing well, or that one of your colleagues on your team is getting some praise, or even you're getting some praise to get motivation. Doesn't do anything with Zoom or chat fatigue, and I wouldn't say it has a effect either way on productivity either. Juan, I'll kick it back to you here.
Great. Tip number 4, monthly executive and mid-management information or meetings, updates. So here, what we do here and what we've heard from our colleagues at other companies that seems to be effective is, if it's a small company, the CEO could do it. If it's a large company like GE or Coca-Cola, a division head could do it, or a regional manager or divisional manager. But give current vision and goals at the beginning of the year. Give product updates if there's something important that just got launched, operational updates, customer updates if there's a win, kind of like in the ring the bell example Charles gave. Other key wins, employee updates, somebody joined the team in a different region, or somebody succeeded and won a big account, give kudos to them. Somebody had a baby or just got married, why not give those updates? Organizational changes, other HR and policy updates. For instance, around working remote, there's a lot of HR movement now on how do we manage a hybrid remote work world that's not going to go away, and what does that look like? And that challenge, there'll be updates, constant updates, also around COVID and testing and how to work with that in our environment. One other thing that we actually just started at Humantelligence, we did it today, a second Tuesday of the month for 1 hour, 20 employees. We get on, and everybody has about 3 minutes, and they go over a mood meter, 0 to 10, what their biggest accomplishment was so far in the month, what their biggest future project, task, or thing they need to accomplish this month, and what challenge or obstacle to get there, as well as something personal, some fun fact or something that they want to share about their personal life. We did our first one today. It was recommended by some individuals on their team last December in our annual review and what to do better next year. And we kicked it off, and it was great. It was fun. It was motivating, and it really helps build community, even though we're all far away and a lot of us have never met, build community. All these things lead to attacking some of these symptoms. For example, isolation, lack of belonging, motivation, productivity. Those are all helped by this kind of thing done by a company every month and by leaders and team members. Next.
Perfect. And as I transition into this next slide, Juan, I'm going to let everybody know I'm putting the slides in the chat again. It just got brought to my attention that the chat actually disappears after a certain period of time. So I'll put those in there again right now. Go ahead, Juan.
Okay, so tip number 5, regular one-on-one meetings with coworkers and managers. So quick tips. Managers can use this time to gauge the mood meter. I do this every week with my one-on-ones with my team. Most of the time, people are at a 7 or 8. There are some optimistic people who are always at a 9 and some always at a 6, but most of the time they're at a certain number, and you track this as a manager. And the week that somebody goes from an 8 every week to a 6, that's a great way of then probing and understanding why, and it helps you connect and ask, is it something personal, professional? So just kicking off your one-on-ones with a mood meter gauge is really, really helpful, really, really powerful. Second, always start with the subordinate's list of updates and questions first, right? Instead of the manager telling the subordinate what they want to get out of the meeting, those one-on-ones really should be about the subordinate being able to list out what they want to get accomplished in the meeting, updates and or questions, and how the manager can support them. This is the time for that subordinate. And so for the manager, really learn how to hold space, listen before jumping in with prescriptions. Third, cover any blockers that coworker or manager can help remove. So, you're there as a manager to help navigate the organization, help navigate problem solving for your subordinates, and give them cover and help. And so really be a guide to them as much as you can and help any blockers to them achieving their goals. What this does, if you have these kind of regular weekly meetings for 30 minutes and efficient, where the agenda is sent by the subordinate to the manager ahead of time, just bullet points, not anything formal. This helps with isolation and lack of belonging. It helps with motivation and helps with productivity, especially productivity. Without these, after a while, you start to get disjointed. You don't know if everybody's running in the same direction. So it's great for the individual, the manager, and the overall group or team and company all going and rowing in the same direction. Next.
Cool. So this takes us into, treating that underlying cause that we talked about earlier. And so these are going to be the tips that are, longer lasting and sustainable. And so once you kind of put some of these things in place, then some of these other items that we just covered will become more sustainable over time. Also, I notice it's, at the 33-minute mark. I understand that some people probably have other meetings at this point, as they usually do, and so this will be recorded, or it is being recorded, and there are slides, so I will send those out after today's presentation. Okay, so Juan, I will kick it back over to you.
Great. So tip number 6, culture and remote work or worker scorecards and diagnostics. As you can see on the right there are tools, Humantelligence has one, that actually can tell you about the challenges psychologically and work style wise that an individual and a team, one by one or as a group, will have working remote. And like I said earlier, it's like a muscle. Basketball player, right hand, born that way, easy, needs to work at it to get the left hand as good. It's the same thing with remote work. It's just like a muscle. And so leverage tools like that to get these scorecard diagnostics that also give prescriptions, okay? And so on the first bullet point, make sure you don't confuse the tool I just spoke to you about with engagement surveys. Those engagement surveys that many companies use are great for understanding where people are really upset, unhappy, which you need to do, but it's really not going to identify the culture of the organization. Engagement surveys don't detect the kind of underlying information needed to address culture or the alignment of an organization's culture to strategy. For instance, an engagement survey will not tell you if, for instance, you need a really creative, innovative group of people or people to work that way. It will never tell you an engagement survey if you actually have those people or they're working in that fashion. That could lead to the fall of your company and the failure of that division or product group. Yet their engagement surveys could be 80% super engaged, love my job, but it could be completely misaligned with the culture of the task at hand and that company or that group. Second, truly learn the behaviors, motivators, and work environment. We at Humantelligence call that the BMW. Not to give BMW any credit, but it is a high-performing machine. If you want to be a high-performing company, you need to know the BMW of every employee, every team, every division, every geography, all the way up to the CEO level. What is the BMW of my company? What is our culture, basically? This impacts the ways in which your employees work, and specifically within a remote work culture. So uncover how to motivate them, give them a sense of belonging, and ultimately improve productivity. Next.
Yeah, and I'll also mention, as I go here to the next slide, I'll also mention if you go to that link that I just put in the chat, you can actually sign up a free team on there. So if you want to just get a culture diagnostic or remote work diagnostic for your team, you can do that through there. And then if you have questions about it, you can reach out. Juan, I'll kick it back to you here.
Next. Culture remote worker scorecard diagnostic tool. Again, how does this interact with symptoms? Well, when you get these kind of diagnostics, you can get rid of the Zoom and chat fatigue. You can get rid of lack of belonging. You can increase motivation, increase productivity, and it really does change culture and alignment. So if you look at Charles's results there, just in one of the three areas, right, the B of behavior, so we're not looking there at motivations or work styles, but he's extremely reflective and cautious. He's kind of a stability-oriented person at a higher vibration than change-oriented, although he is somewhat decisive and spontaneous in some instances. This aligns well with a remote worker, right, who typically are less outgoing and less free form. And so, this is an example of how you can use a tool like this to understand how they'd work remote. And the tools like this also give insights on wellness, on psychological well-being. Next. Tip 7, culture mapping exercise, workshops with a team. So if you roll data up around psychometrics and understanding of one person to a team level, as you can see visually in the right, where that team, Humantelligence in this case, the team that I manage, if you can read the blue bubble, the majority, around 50%, are high or intense helping, with the second most dominant trait of our team in terms of behaviors being freedom oriented. I'm sorry, these are motivators. We're helping oriented, we're freedom oriented and supporting. These are things that are really helpful to understand the team. This uncovers unique culture insights for each team. It uses these talent analytics and data aggregation to create engagement and drive optimal performance. So not only are tools like this now a diagnostic, they're also a prescription that gives you lots of tips on what you need to do to manage a team better, to understand your strengths, weaknesses, and blind spots, and how everybody can work better together. It also measures and gains insights for success. As I had just mentioned, third bullet point, understands the team's behaviors, work motivators, work environments, and what contributes to that team's culture. And lastly, as a result of this understanding, you can now create a more effective and productive work environment aligned to your strategy. Again, emphasis on culture being aligning it to strategy. For the first time ever, companies, divisions, teams, and the leaders of all those, all the way down to middle management, can align the strategy to the culture. Better said, the culture to the strategy. This leads to improved performance and results. Next. Tip 7 that we just went over, if you do these culture mapping exercises and workshops with your team, you can not impact really Zoom fatigue, but you do improve lack of belonging, creates better community, more motivation, more productivity, and again, aligns culture to strategy. And if you look at the image on the right, we had previously on the previous page showed the bubble form. Imagine seeing your team with pictures of where they plot on this axis for behaviors between people who are stability oriented versus change, those who are deliberate, decisive, how to manage meetings, how to, who to call on, who not to, who you're going to have to maybe give questions in advance, who's going to drive meetings, who's, creative for your meetings. Or for projects or assigning projects, who's going to be so structured they're going to enjoy taking notes in a meeting and not kind of shrug when you call on them randomly because they're not structured. Anyways, lots of insights around 28 areas of your team that help with performance, collaboration, and productivity. Next.
Yeah, and Juan, I think one thing to point out here is actually we covered it earlier today on our team call when we did this 2 months ago, when we did our culture mapping, our recent one. Some of us were reflective, and when we asked questions to the group during the culture mapping, the reflective group basically didn't respond, while the outgoing group was all over in answering the questions that were being asked. And so I personally fell into that reflective group. And so now, personally, I can make an adjustment to, try to be the first person to speak up or answer a question. So it definitely helps on a personal level and on a team level. Juan, I think you may be muted.
Yes, I was. Thanks, Charles. Tip number 8, create benchmarks for the future. So if you look at the right screenshot, you have on the left second bar, current team culture with the key attributes of our team, for instance, 2 years ago, and a index, gap index of 28, and a target team culture. There are tools now where you can codify what you want your culture of your team to be, and then it'll map how different every person is. That's the third column for each employee that says target with the orange 47, red 39, 36, 36. And it shows the gap analysis for the team and each individual. So understanding where you want to go, codifying it, having a tool tell you the gap as a number, and then qualitatively training and roadmaps for each person and that team leader to get to where you need to go. So first bullet point on the left here, what is the profile of a person who was a top performer in the office versus top performers in distributed work environment? Imagine getting these benchmarks and insights around why people perform at work physically versus not at work. We've all learned in the last 8 months, some of our highest performers physically in the office become the worst performers at home, and vice versa. We worked with lots of call center companies about 3 years ago prior to COVID, where they wanted to save money on real estate. So you have 500, 700 men and women in these call centers that were asked to go home. And of course, they thought, well, we have our high performing top 20%. A lot of those people who were the top performers in call centers, when they got home to do it from home with great software back in the day from 3 years ago, they ended up not performing well, and some of the worst performers at the call center became the best at home. You may find that to be the case in many of the areas at your company. There are tools to measure that now. Second bullet point, you can manage employees more effectively by understanding what makes them tick while remote. For example, motivated by leading projects versus being an individual contributor, etc. These psychometric tools will help you get that insight to help you manage everyone in your organization and or your team. Third, hire more effectively for diversity of thought, fit to company strategy, or fit to top performers. So to the third bullet point, everybody talks about hiring for fit. You don't need software to hire for similarity, but that's not the point of hiring. You're not trying to hire everyone like the hiring manager. You need a platform that can help you understand if your team does not have diversity of thought, if you want better problem solving and better complexity for your team in terms of answering questions and attacking the market, tools like this will allow you to hire better for that diversity of thought, or what some executives at Ultimate Software have told us, which is, and the way they describe it, culture add. And so whether you want to clone high performing sales or call center agents, maybe 30% of your employees, or for the other 70% of employees, guarantee diversity of thought and add to culture on a team, there are tools that help you do that. And so look out for those types of tools. Next. Tip number 8, impact. If you do those kind of things with platforms like Humantelligence, no, we don't help with Zoom chat fatigue, but we do help with that lack of belonging, motivation, productivity, and we help you align culture to strategy and change your culture over time. And to that third last bullet point, this is a platform that is used for diversity and inclusion, meaning we don't talk about quotas and just placing minorities in positions of power. That leads to failure, because if you don't change the underlying culture over time and have a culture of inclusivity and be able to hire based on data, not subjectivity, those people you place through affirmative action won't actually work out that well. And so this kind of platform also allows you to change the underlying culture of an organization so that long-term it does become more inclusive, therefore then leads to results of being a more diverse environment. Next. Tip number 9, people first workplace tools. So we talked early in the first couple slides around phase 1 was getting technology implemented so that people could actually work from home. Now phase 2, entering 21, there are collaboration plugins and enhancement tools that really will help everything from Microsoft Teams, Slack, Outlook, Gmail, Google Calendar, so that everyone can understand each other and connect and communicate better. So there's an EQ Everywhere plugin actually that Humantelligence invented that in your emails, in your calendars, whether it's Outlook, Microsoft Teams or Gmail, you can enhance your ability to truly understand colleagues before communicating with them. So imagine, as the example on the right there in the visual, you click on a calendar meeting or in an email, same technology, and it pulls up a name of the organizer or a member of that meeting. You can click on their name in that moment in what they call your workflow 20 times a day if you need, and it'll pull up the business personas. In this case, Kurt is a Maverick, a Scholar, and a Dynamo. And if you were to click on any of these 4 bars, the first one being tips communicating with Kurt, second one being influencing him, third motivating, fourth learning style, etc., 4 or 5 bullet points then pop up that help guide you on how to communicate, motivate, influence, and interact with either the leader in a meeting or a group of people in the meeting. Second bullet point here, virtual whiteboarding, ideation, and brainstorming tools. There's lots of tools out there. We do not make some of those, but lots of tools that have been created for all these other technology platforms that you're well aware of that I mentioned above, that give employees the freedom to express thoughts in a much more free-form way that's more natural, that you felt you could only do in an office or in a room. Now you really can do all those things virtually. And thirdly, digital and virtual workplaces that help bring everyone and every tool into a single space where they can work more effectively together. But we've actually partnered with one of these groups. Charles, I think you know the name of that company. It's an amazing platform used by several large organizations that they have, their clients find it really useful. I don't know if you know the name of that company, Charles.
Yeah, it's Bluescape. It's a really cool tool. Just go to bluescape.com. They've got whiteboarding and a virtual workplace, so it's all kind of together. And I think to Juan's point, and and going back to earlier about the 2 phases. Phase 1 was all about the communication tools. Phase 2 is all about bringing people together and enhancing those communication tools and taking it to the next level. I think all 3 of these definitely help to do that. I've actually got a handful of people in the chat right now, or in the questions queue right now, saying how important EQ is to taking it to the next level, and how virtual whiteboarding has helped them with ideation and things like that. So cool. Juan, I'll go ahead and kick it back to you here and kick it over to our final slide.
Great. And Charles, check your text message. I have something you want you to do at the end. Okay, so if the impact of tip 9, if you apply those different new technologies and collaboration plugins to the platforms that you all probably have invested in, it does help with Zoom chat fatigue, makes it more fun. It creates community in a sense that you're all actually back at work together. It helps motivate people, and it makes you more productive, and everyone on your team more productive, and rolling that up through the whole organization. And yes, the holy grail of business and HR's goal is to help the people, i.e. their culture, align to the strategy or challenge at hand. Next.
Cool. And then, my last thing here is, if you do want to look for those workplace tools, like EQ Everywhere, you can go to eqeverywhere.com. For these other ones, virtual whiteboarding or virtual workplaces or digital workplaces, I definitely recommend going to Capterra. That seems to be the best place to go and find information and do side-by-side comparisons across a lot of different tools. So definitely go check out tools there. Juan, I know you wanted to kind of share your book list for 2021 before we get into our questions here. So I'll give you the floor here for a moment to go through those.
Yeah, so every year I read 4 books as one a quarter. And if those books are good, I want to recommend them to folks the next year. So if you got, and Charles, can you send this list out to everybody so they don't have to write it all down?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So the 4 books I read last year that are wonderful, they're not about business. These are personal books about spirituality and connecting with yourself and getting the most out of life, both work and personal. So the first one is The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukov. Oprah Winfrey says it's the most important book she's ever read. A huge expectation, but it matched that expectation. Second book is called The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. Third book is The Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, and read his first one, not the second or third versions. And then the last book, pretty deep and intense. If you like the first three, then you should like the fourth. If you don't like the first three, don't read the fourth. It's called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. Thanks so much, Charles, for letting me give those book tips as we enter 2021 for each quarter. Let's go to Q&A now.
All right, cool. So we've got quite a bit of conversation happening. A lot of people talking about how they do surveys and that they like more of a diagnostic approach. For those of you who have mentioned that to me, I will reach out to you directly. A few people asking for case studies, but let me just go through here and organize. So just give me a moment. All right, so Juan, think back to the polls, the poll question. That's when this question came in. Do you think that the pandemic has had impact on these results? Most people were working remotely right now. We're not hired as remote positions, didn't choose it.
So the question being, has that impact, has COVID or working remote because of COVID impacted the ability to work remote? Or?
Yeah, so think about the question of, in office people being engaged versus not in office people being engaged. Who's more engaged, right? So do you think that the pandemic had impact on those results? So when the people in the office had to go remote, I believe is what the question is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, clearly everybody dipped in their productivity and the whole country kind of just dipped. You could feel collective like ugh, and it was difficult. Then we all got back on our feet thinking, okay, we're going to go back soon, then realized, no, this is here to stay. And just like the example of right hand, left hand as a basketball player or soccer player, being right footed and practicing the left, people have gotten used to it. And what was not normal to us and what was hard to do is now becoming normal. And actually, they've found studies now that they're finding that most people enjoy it more than they did going to work. There's about 10% that do not enjoy working remote, more about 20% that find it equally engaging and fun. But now it's up to 60 and 70% of people actually prefer to work remote. The cat is out of the bag. Driving 2 hours a day in your car, 1 hour each way, and I'm from Maryland, suburbs of Maryland with the Beltway, that's 2 hours each way. 4 hours lost times 5 days a week, that's 20 hours that's now gained in productivity and life, recapturing life. Technology is going to allow us to have more life now. That's not going to go away. So I think started as a negative, entering 2021 is going to be a huge positive. Next.
Cool. So I already answered this person's question, but I thought it would be a good one for the audience to know as well. Can the scorecard be used to do the culture mapping exercise as well?
Yes, you can do the scorecard for your BMW 28 characteristic results, as well as for the remote work, and then it rolls up for a team, both for the team culture, but also for remote work for the team as a scorecard. Yes.
Cool. All right. Handful of people asking for slides. I will make sure to send those out after the fact. All right, so I will send the book list out. Juan, how do you suggest holding remote employees accountable?
That's a tough one that companies, specifically heads of HR and the top consulting firms, are still trying to grapple with. You still have all the metrics that you hold, employees accountable for. That doesn't change. Now, there's a lot more reasons that people say they couldn't accomplish things, but I think you keep the same metrics, the same direction, and it's just staying more on top of people and kind of, instead of waiting to the end of the quarter or semester or year to go over results, you maybe want to do that on a weekly or monthly basis so that if it does get off track, it doesn't get too far off track and you're not too late to address it. It's a great question. It's still one that everyone is grappling with.
Okay, next question. And we've got 2 more here, Juan, unless we get a handful more. Actually, it looks like 3. How can I try EQ everywhere with my HR team?
just contact Humantelligence through our website, or when Charles sends out these emails, you can send it back to him. And we give a free trial for a team to do it and get the insights. So it's all automated process. And for a paid trial, we can work you with our industrial psychologist and verbally go over all the results with you and how it can be put into play.
Cool. And then Juan, I have somebody asking a question about just giving, you know, a high level testimonial. Maybe you could do that here. This person works for, you know, a popular beauty brand. So I can't think of a client off the top of my head, but maybe talk at a high level about, you know, some of the results that some of the Humantelligence clients have seen from the remote work scorecard, or the culture workshops, things like that in general.
Yeah, I mean, we were just with two senior executives, one being the global marketing head at a BASF, for example, I think a $10 billion, 200,000 employee company. You know, and the comment at the end of the workshop was, this was really worth it, really motivating, and it helps me understand my team more and how to manage them and get what I want out of them. We've done the same thing with the senior leadership of Coca-Cola North America, their head of culture and engagement, their head of communication and collaboration, and all of their teams in HR. We've done the same with the heads of Bank of the West workshops, where they found huge value. The bread company out of Hawaii, based out of LA, King's Hawaiian, last year we did a workshop with all their management team, and then they used it to help hire they went against their intuition and hired someone based on the data that was the right decision that they could not have done to add culture to that team. King's Hawaiian, Honda has been using our tool for 4 years. We've won the Honda Premier Partner Award 4 years in a row. No one's ever won it twice. That's out of 10,000 suppliers. So clearly Honda is a great anecdote. Nobody keeps giving you an award like that unless you keep adding value. And many, many more. I mean, I don't want to use all the time up just reading a list of our clients, but all these clients have done these kind of workshops through either talent development, talent management, or L&D, learning and development groups, and then are basically using it moving forward with many other teams and leaders throughout the organizations.
Cool. So we're out of time. There were a handful more questions that came in, but I will reach out to you one off. We got a lot of really great feedback during today's webinar, so I really appreciate all of you putting your comments and your questions in during today's presentation. As a reminder, you know, there's the remote work scorecard out there, EQ everywhere. If you want a tour of Humantelligence, you can go to humantelligence.com /request demo. Again, I'll be sending out an email with all of these materials after today. So maybe later this afternoon, maybe first thing tomorrow morning. What's that one?
And Charles, like we did last webinar, which was very useful, maybe send a separate email request asking if anybody wants us to reach out to them regarding Humantelligence, that just let you know, like,
Yep.
and that we'll reach out to them as well.
Cool. Yeah, so I can do that. But yeah, so big thank you. Shout out to Juan. Thank you for presenting today. Big shout out to our audience today. We had an awesome turnout. So once again, I really appreciate you all joining us today. And keep your eyes peeled for another webinar later this month on, it's going to be more on a DEI type topic. And so that registration will open up tomorrow. So keep an eye out for an email there. But one last time, thank you. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone. God bless.